Hello, denizens of the interwebs, and welcome to another episode of Movies Good, Internet Bad, a celebration of the cinema uploaded right here to the place that hates it the most. And God, in this one, we're going to talk about a lot of hate. I'm Corey, that's Shane, and in this video, we're talking about the first two episodes of season 2 of Amazon's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Boy, what a long title. Shane, how are you, sir? You seem a little bit stressed. Is everything okay?
Yeah, I feel like I'm experiencing the worst case of deja vu.
Really? Why?
Yeah, just a little bit concerning. Somebody changed something in the Matrix. I don't know what they changed, but
Hmm.
you know, I feel like on this show, we just reviewed a TV show from a
Uh-huh.
streaming service
Uh-huh.
that was a prequel to an early 2000s film trilogy
Uh-huh.
that everyone seemed to hate, but the critic reviews were fine.
Okay.
And there was this character called the Stranger, and everyone called it woke, and everyone got really mad.
Huh.
Did we do that?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Doesn't ring a bell. I swear we just reviewed something like this. Oh well. Oh
Eh.
well.
Anyway, moving on. So subscribe, like this video, all that good stuff. Shane, to set the stage here, we weren't a channel when the first season of this show graced our screens, depending on who you're talking to. Graced is a interesting word to use there. What did you think of the first season of this show with its lavish budget and seemingly blank check that they were given to make it?
Yeah. I have to be honest. I did not finish the first season until like last week. Because I remember watching the first 3 or 4 episodes and thinking overall it was fine, but it was just a little bit boring to me. And
Okay.
then I got preoccupied with something else and then just never returned to it. And then when season 2 was coming around, I was like, okay, I should go catch up with this. Um, it was fine. I think its biggest issues are maybe the issues that we're going to have with the second season too. It seems to be pointing that direction. Which is, as you so lovingly put it, prequelitis.
Who, me?
It's a Coreyism,
Uh,
prequelitis.
Prequelitis, man. It's a thing, and you see it all the time because it's like I don't know why, but prequels have become just like a thing you do
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah, and I think
Weird.
the issue is that the whole season 1 seemed like a setup for a bunch of crazy reveals that everyone already knew the answer to,
Hmm.
like 5 minutes into the show. So you have the Sauron reveal where it's like, this guy's totally not Sauron. Okay, he's Sauron.
Just kidding.
And then there's this stranger, which it's totally not Gandalf. And then he says, follow your nose. And you're like, well, it's Gandalf.
All right, it's Gandalf.
And then the Southlands, which everyone knows like is Mordor. And so it just becomes Mordor. And you're like, well, yeah.
However, when they do that PowerPoint transition where it says Mordor, it is the goofiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And it makes me laugh every time I see it. It's great.
It's just like telling the audience, like, just in case you weren't aware, this is Mordor.
Yeah. The giant volcano
metal
back
band.
there. You see that one? Yeah. Do you remember a volcano from Lord of the Rings? You don't, because you're stupid and audiences are dumb. Okay, it's Mordor. We're gonna tell you right here.
With a Metallica font.
It should have been Papyrus. It would have been the only thing that would have made it better is if it was Papyrus. But I think James Cameron has that copywritten somewhere that he's the only one who can use that. Him and Ryan Gosling.
But yeah, that was my main issue with the first season is it doesn't work to do a sort of like a mystery box reveal type of setup for your show when everyone already knows the answers. I think I made this comparison with you to the Star Wars prequels, and it would be as if they took Emperor Palpatine and gave him a new name. And then the whole trilogy is like, who's the Emperor? We're going to find out who the Emperor is. And everyone's like, it's that guy. It's the guy who's like the sleazy politician taking power. Like, no, it's not that guy. Okay, it's that guy. Big reveal. Music swells.
Unlimited power.
Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, I totally saw that coming. So that doesn't work. And where prequels work to me is where they are focused more on like the characters and how they're reacting to the things that we're seeing that we already know. But here it feels very much like it's, you know, taking the audience along for a ride. Remember this? And it sucks because I think the actual production of the show is very good.
Oh, it's insane.
I will say it's a little lit like a sitcom-y in some parts.
Sometimes,
where it feels like this is way too digital. Whereas the original Lord of the Rings were shot on film, of course, and you know that it looks a lot more textured, and I think that texture lends itself to historical drama, like that type of. It's not
still
real
to me, damn it.
It's not real, but this sort of setting, right, where that kind of grit it helps the show and would help the show, but you don't get it, and so a lot of it just seems too. It's not unlike the Star Wars prequels, right? It just seems too clean.
It's
right?
so clean. It's like there's not a speck of noise or dust or anything.
Yeah.
Not even in, like, there are some scenes, particularly in these first 2 episodes of the new season, they're lit by like a crescent moon. They're very dark, and there is no noise. There's no grain. There's nothing.
It's very, very obviously day for night shot. Like they totally. I mean, Game of Thrones did it too, but you can tell that it's not actually shot at night. It is shot at sometime around dusk or maybe sunset, and then they just throw a blue desaturated filter over the whole thing, and it's nighttime now.
Right. Yeah, it's the first season though. To just kind of wrap up on that before we move into these new ones, the main reason that I liked it is because Lord of the Rings is a franchise that I am not beholden to the lore of.
I'm not either.
So with Star Wars, I know all the lore inside and out, and like if something doesn't make sense, it sets off a trigger in your brain where it's like, wait a minute, that shouldn't be the way things are because that's not canon, and blah 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 blah. Same thing with Marvel Comics, same thing with DC. You see characters and you're like, oh, I know that person. They're going to die someday, and this is how it's going to happen because that's how it happened in the comic, right?
Yeah.
With Lord of the Rings, I don't know any of that stuff. So for me to just sit down and be like, oh, look at all the pretty pictures. This is great. I get to kind of feel like a general audience member to a degree.
Yeah. And I will say the people that hate this show the most are the lore focused people that are so into Tolkien. And I think at that point, the show is just, unfortunately, it's just not for you. Right. I don't think that, and it's clear that like the showrunners actually do love the IP. But it feels like a little fan filmy instead of trying to capture the spirit of Tolkien. It's more like celebrating Tolkien. And that's where I think the disconnect is between the people who just want to see like basically what Peter Jackson did, where that was also a very, like, he changed a lot of things, but I think he captured the spirit of it very well.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is much more, I guess, modern, but celebrating the IP. And that's where I think you lose some of the goodwill.
Yeah. The other thing, I was actually reading an article about this when I was doing my preparation for this. So the Peter Jackson movies take place in the third age of Middle Earth, right? And then there's the first age, and then this show takes place in the second age. Apparently, the second age is the one that has the most gaps in the literature, where it's like a lot of, well, this happens, but we don't really tell you how or why it happens in the text, right? From Tolkien. So I think that's why they picked it, is because it gives them a little bit more free reign to do whatever they want. And because of that, it has pissed a lot of people off. Because that's just how it goes in today's day and age. But to me, I don't care about any of that because I don't know any of the backstories. I've only seen the 6 movies. I've only seen the Hobbit movies like once, and I was like, once was enough for those. They weren't very good. I adore the original trilogy. They're fantastic. But with this one, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt and see where it goes. The first season moved a little bit too slowly for my taste, and it was so littered with characters. There was too much going on, and they tried to tell it all in 8 episodes, and it just seemed they stretched themselves too thin.
Mhm.
I think was the big problem. That, and if you look online, they will tell you that Galadriel is just the worst. She's a she. But moving into the second season, my big hope is that as this goes on, because we only watched the first couple because it's all that's out, is that they'll hopefully keep the same scale, because the scale is awesome, right? To be able to see the huge, vast landscapes, like that's built into the DNA of Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
But I would like to see them focus on only a certain amount of arcs or a certain amount of characters, instead of, it's almost like Whiplash, right?
Yeah.
When you go from one plot line to another so quickly.
Yeah, and that was kind of my issue with the first one, especially because the plot threads seem to be organized by reveal. We've got the Gandalf plot line and the Mordor plot line and the Sauron plot line. And those are all kept very distinct. I think in the first 2 episodes of this season, it does feel a little bit like those plot lines are overlapping a little bit, and that's why I have enjoyed the second season a little bit more so far, because it feels like there's a little bit more pace. There's a lot more character dynamics and conflict between them rather than one character per plot line. Because if you look at the original Lord of the Rings movies, part of why they work so well, even with a vast ensemble cast, is in the first movie, there's really only one major perspective or point of view, right? Like you don't switch perspectives between different characters until the very, very end, where like Frodo's running away. It's
the Fellowship. They're one big group. They're all moving together.
Yep.
And then eventually they split and they go their separate ways for the next film.
So then the second one, you get 3. You get Merry and Pippin, you get Aragorn and all their Rohan stuff, and then Frodo and Sam.
Yeah.
But then I don't think it, at least to my knowledge, it doesn't really expand beyond that too much. It's still like 3 max. Right. And I think that's where you can kind of still sustain some momentum, is when you only have a small number of different plot threads that you're switching back and forth between, so that you can really focus on them rather than just going back and forth and you got 10 different things and you're juggling all of them at the same time. That's where you run into not only the audience tuning out, but you run into pacing issues. We talked about House of the Dragon having this issue in this season, where Daemon had to sustain an entire season's worth of plot, but he only had like 3 pages of plot.
Right.
And so he just kept extending it throughout, and then it just makes that plot line boring. So when you have so many of those, you have to time that choreography so perfectly. And when you don't, it really shows and drags the show down. And I felt like season 1 struggled in that regard.
Yeah.
Season 2 seems like it's got a little bit more pep. And so I'm a little bit more optimistic.
So Shane, are what you saying, is it that one season of a television show isn't necessarily enough, and that sometimes a show needs to get greenlit for a second to find its footing and do better and be better?
I'm getting that deja vu again. I don't.
Are you okay? You look a little sweaty on the forehead. Are you all right?
Yeah, it is funny, right? It similar to that other show that we've talked about a lot on
Never
here.
heard of it.
Similar to that one, everyone review bombed it, and it had like this one had what, 38% or something audience score for the first season, which I don't think the first season was great, but I don't think it's 38% bad. Like it's just so overblown in today's day and age, where everything has to, you have to hate it, and everyone complains about the wrong things, I think, right? The reason why season 1 doesn't work is some of the things that we've outlined, but that doesn't mean it's inherently bad. But a lot of people don't care about the actual writing or story. They just know something's off, and they immediately point to like women as the problem or something. Or it's like, this show's not working for me. I can't figure it out. Oh, it's because there's a woman. No, that's not why. Galadriel is not the issue with season 1. It's all the things that we just talked about, right? And this happens a lot, right? This is going to happen when there's a bunch of people who are first and foremost like nerds, not film people, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to complain about the nerd stuff and the lore and all that stuff, and not and to be clear, there's nothing wrong with being a nerd. I'm a nerd. Cory's a nerd. I'm not saying that, but people are going to focus on that type of stuff and not the actual filmmaking aspect of it. And that's where it gets a little bit blurred, and you get all the controversy and hatred and all that.
Yeah, and the excuse that a lot of people go to, and the perfect example here is the Andor show that Star Wars did. There were a lot of people who are like, man, I just want good writing. I don't want bad writing. I don't want lazy writing in my Star Wars. And then Andor comes out, which is the finest writing that has ever graced a Star Wars anything. And then they all said, well, it doesn't feel like Star Wars enough to me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, which one do you want? Like, there's no winning at some point.
Yeah.
I don't think the fault of this show has anything to do with the characters or the characterization or anything like that. I think it has to do with script issues and, like you said, a feeling of necessity to celebrate what has already happened, even though in the timeline of the story it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
That's like a weird catch-22 conundrum.
Every prequel does it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. It kind of reminds me of Solo, the movie. Yeah. Where it's you got to have the Kessel Run because he said that one time. And you got to have how he's meeting Chewbacca and his name reveal and all that stuff.
He's got to win the Falcon or else we don't know that he won the Falcon. Yes, we do. He has the Falcon in the other movies. He won it. It's fine.
I think it was in episode 2 of this new season. They are talking to the stranger and they say something along the lines of like, what is your name? And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, I feel like I'll know it when I hear it. And I'm like, I just know there's going to be a scene where somebody says Gandalf, and then he does the exact bit from Lord of the Rings where he's like, Gandalf, that was my name. Gandalf the Grey. I'm like, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. And the music's going to swell. And the showrunners are going to be patting themselves on the back because they did the reveal. And everyone's just going to roll their eyes so hard into the back of their skulls. It's exactly what happened in Solo with the Han Solo reveal. Exact same thing is going to happen in this. And I'm going to hate that. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's like,
sure.
It doesn't need to be built around this. It needs to be built upon what I actually am enjoying is like the Elrond and Galadriel conflicts and stuff like that. And then Sauron being all sneaky like, and all that stuff is fun, and focus all your energy on that and not so much on all of the stuff we know is going to happen.
Yeah. I think the 2 arcs that you mentioned are the most fascinating ones so far, because at this point you've got Galadriel and the High King, and then the guy that builds boats, I guess. I don't remember his name. But they're now wearing the rings, right? And Elrond is conflicted because he's like, those things are bad news.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be wearing them. That's good conflict. That's what there should be, especially because they're friends and they've gone to war together and all that. Like, that is a good plot arc. And then the Sauron stuff is also great because who doesn't love a charming villain that is seducing someone to do his bidding for him?
Yeah.
That's just like textbook filmmaking type stuff. People love that. And the guy that's playing Sauron is doing a great job.
Yeah.
In those scenes. That one with Celebrimbor at the end of the second episode, it was great. I absolutely loved it.
I have seen God.
Well, right, but in the way they framed it, it was all golden, right? Yeah. So it almost kind of looked like he was coming from Valinor, which is where all these elves, that's like the promised land for them.
Yep.
And he was like, we're going to work together. You're my guy. And Celebrimbor like bought, right? He bowed. He got on his knees and bowed to him, right?
Hook, line, and sinker.
That's good stuff. I like that a lot. And villains don't always have to be, they don't always have to look like Thanos, right? Where they're ugly and scary and all that. Like, sometimes
a villain does a lot for a story, I feel.
Absolutely. Sometimes the best villains are the ones that somebody thinks is their friend.
And
then the rug gets pulled out from underneath them towards the end. And we're obviously barreling towards more rings getting made.
Yeah.
Because since this is a prequel, we know there's 9 for men and 7 for dwarves and whatever. I don't know the numbers.
You haven't memorized the entire introduction to the Fellowship of the Ring that Galadriel says?
At me in the comments with how many rings there are and who they're for, and I'll be happy to say, yes, you're right. You did it.
Fan, Cory.
Hey, that's fine. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care. But that kind of stuff, that's to me where prequels work.
Yeah.
Is not necessarily something happened, because we know that something happened, but it's the how and the why that it happened that can be interesting. My favorite prequel of all time, no surprise, is Better Call Saul, which is the prequel to Breaking Bad. If you watched Better Call Saul before watching Breaking Bad, you would probably enjoy it just as much as you did if you watched it after watching Breaking Bad, because everything that they tell in that story could be told as its own show. And all it does is inform what happens later and have it make more sense and have things become more tragic. It's not like, hey, look, that's the school that Walter White was a teacher at.
Right.
You know, like, they don't care about any of that kind of stuff.
There's not a musical swell when they show that on the screen.
Right, exactly. and like towards the end, they started doing some cameos, but that was because the timeline of the show was starting to overlap with the timeline of Breaking Bad. That's okay, you know, but like the first 2-3 seasons of that show have nothing to do with Breaking Bad at all.
Yeah.
And they're still fantastic.
Yeah. So. And we could talk about Andor in the same way, right? Where it's a prequel to Rogue One, but thus far it's just setting up its own thing and its own characters, and it's not so much focused on that cascade of reveals. But I have a feeling that season 2 will have a lot of that. Because, like, they've already announced some casting. But but
you're getting closer to that story.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense to start to do that. So with this Lord of the Rings, though, we're like a very long way away from the events of the films. So they don't have to rush to get into any of that kind of stuff. And the other plot lines that are there, like the dwarves that are in the mines that have a Balrog underneath them.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what more can you do there? You know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, and I know that the storyline is that they find the mithril and they dig so much for it that they awaken the Balrog, right? That's their ultimate demise. But
that's it.
Yeah, there's not a lot to go on there, and so I find that those parts of the show for me are the least interesting.
Yes,
because it just feels like they don't have much more to do, and I know that. At least lore-wise, I think they help out in some of the battles, so that's probably where they're going with it this season.
Sure.
But then I don't know what more you can do there. But yeah, I mean, the big issue again is what is there here except for stuff that we're barreling towards for the original movies? Because I know that we're gonna have the fight where he cuts the ring off the finger for Isildur, like that's where we're, and that's the end game, right?
It's gotta be,
because after that we kind of know what happens. So I do find it interesting too that Isildur is not a bigger part of this story. It feels like if you were going to focus on anyone, Isildur might be the most tragic of them all, because he's the one that eventually dooms everybody for a while. Pun very intended. Doom everybody. But I think episode 3 is actually more about him, so maybe they'll focus more on him.
Okay, yeah, I haven't watched the 3rd episode yet.
Yeah, I haven't either,
because they're long.
They are, yeah.
Everybody likes to bitch about runtimes, but this show, they're all thick boys. Every single one that has come out so far is at least an hour long.
Yeah.
Whereas if you watch any shows from Disney, they're like, you get 35 minutes, including credits.
Sorry. And then we'll cancel it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think they're off to a decent start. I thought the 2nd episode was quite a bit better than the first.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I'd rather they ramp up than ramp down.
Yeah.
So, and we'll see where it goes. But that's really kind of all I feel about this show is, it's pretty to look at. It sounds good. The performances are good. Some of it's a little cringy. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. I can't really say much more about that than similar to everything else. It doesn't deserve the hate that it gets. I don't think it's particularly great, but season 2 seemingly is getting much better reviews than the first season, both critically and audience score. Of course, we'll see where that goes. There's always the promise of the unknown, right? Where the first couple episodes, you're like, see, it is getting better, and then maybe it devolves further on. But there's optimism. I hope, and clearly now that they have the rights, they're gonna just keep pumping it out and praying that it works eventually.
Well, I think they committed to 5 seasons.
Is it 5 seasons? Yeah.
Yeah. So
they got plenty of time to make this work, and I'm hoping season 2 is a little bit better. And it's all about course correction. Very few shows that I've watched are just perfect from the get-go. Even some of my favorite shows ever take a little bit to get going. Even if the first season is not bad, it's still not perfect. Something like Succession, I would say season 1 is probably the weakest of all of them, despite being good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly better than this, but just saying, in terms of examples, shows tend to build and they get better over time. And I felt like season 1 was at least a passable start, and hopefully season 2 will be a little bit better. And so far it has been.
The showrunners, when they make these shows, the only feedback they get during the first season while it's being made is internal feedback.
Yeah.
And depending on who's involved, it could be a lot of yes people that just, this is great. Yeah, this is great. Just keep doing this, keep doing that. And then the show comes out and people are like, well, what the hell is this crap?
Yeah.
This is terrible, right?
Yeah.
And then if they get lucky enough to continue on with the second season, they make changes based off of critical feedback, audience feedback, stuff from the studio. There's a lot that goes into all that stuff. And, you have to get to the promised land of season 2 to be able to do a lot of that.
One of my favorite examples of taking audience feedback into consideration is in Lost. I believe it's season 3. They introduce a few new characters that they tried to say were on the island this whole time. Because there's a core group of characters, like 8 or 10, that you focus on.
Sure.
And then they kind of ran out of material for those people. And then they're like, well, there were other survivors, but in the first however many seasons, they're just extras. They're just there. They're not doing anything. So they introduced these 2 new characters, Nikki and Paolo, who have been there the whole time. I promise. They were they were totally there. We just didn't see them ever.
They were hiding behind a coconut tree.
Yes. And the audience feedback towards them was so horrible that they actually have an entire episode of the show devoted to killing them in the most inhumane way possible.
See,
they get buried alive because they're paralyzed by a venomous spider, and everyone thinks they're dead, so they bury them, but they're alive.
That's pretty hardcore for a show that aired on ABC during prime time. That's pretty graphic.
It's just such a good example of how people see the feedback, right? And you're going to take all that feedback in, and that's why TV at its best is long form and not these limited series, because they get chances to fix it along the way. You saw that in one of my other favorite shows, The Leftovers. There's some plot lines in season 1 that everyone disliked, and so they just sideline those plots in season 2. They just completely vanish, and then they focus on the ones that work, seasons 2 and 3.
Yep.
And
even
it's
a show like Foundation did that.
Yeah.
They had some stuff in season 1 that was a little bit boring, and in season 2 you see a lot less of those things.
Yep.
They focus on what works, and they make the necessary changes to not only to make the show better, but just to keep people interested. Because if people aren't interested, you're not going to get renewed, and that's what we see with so many shows these days. So, but yeah, all in all, I am curious to see where it goes, and if it can continue to improve on what was there for season 1. We're very much advocates of the idea of actually watching it and seeing how it turns out before deciding we like or dislike it. So, but we figure we'll review this 2 episodes at a time. So the next one will be in a couple weeks when episode 4 arrives, and then we'll kind of go from there. But Shane, any last thoughts on these episodes before we take this bad boy home?
No, I don't think so. We'll see how it goes. At least I'm not bored, which is what happened in season 1. So
okay. So to close things out, what is your prediction for the Rotten Tomatoes audience score by the time the season's over?
53.
53.
We're at 70 right now. I feel like there's going to be a lore mistake in there, and it's going to tank it 20%. because they said a name wrong or something. They changed Kiadi Mundi's birthday. Wait, deja vu again.
Who? The guy with the dick-shaped head? That guy?
Everyone suddenly cared.
Yeah. I guess what though? That show's over now, and people are back to not caring, which is truly incredible. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Movies Good, Internet Bad. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that notifications bell. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know if you liked season 1, if you think season 2 is off to a good start, or if the people making this show are just anti-Tolkien, anti-entertainment, and anti-you. And we'll be back soon. We got some movies coming up that we plan to review, some more TV shows, so stay tuned, and we will see you guys in the next video.